Hi, this is Marty Wilkinson. I'm here today to discuss with you a couple articles which address the concept of school segregation and integration. Back in 1954, the United States Supreme Court struck down state laws which sanctioned the segregation of schools. As a result, we have seen an increasing number of schools that have become more integrated over the years, as well as words in our vocabulary such as diversity comes up quite a lot. As a teacher education candidate, diversity is something that I'm expected to become familiar with. Now, my idea of a diverse school district or a diverse school is a school that welcomes students from all walks of life, regardless of race, regardless of background, gender, sexual orientation, you name it. However, we have seen that in many school districts there still is a tendency to kind of gear towards a predominantly Caucasian demographic, and the two articles that I have will address that. The first article that we're going to be discussing is called Integrated Schools, Finding a New Path. It appeared in Educational Leadership in November 2010. The writers Orfield, Frankenberg, and Siegel Hawley noted that in segregated minority schools, they are segregated by poverty, they're segregated by language, they have less experienced teachers, and the parents are not empowered. At the time of the Brown versus Board of Education decision, 90% of the United States population was white. However, in more recent years, the number of minority populations have grown to increase, and efforts to integrate school populations have faced challenges such as the 2007 Parents Involved in Community Schools versus Seattle School District. The Supreme Court ruled against the voluntary continuation of court-ordered student assignments. It was a plan that was developed to remedy segregation. And furthermore, the U.S. Department of Education, as well as the Office of Civil Rights, they ended up advising, school districts to end desegregation plans and to actually implement race-neutral methods, which the authors argue that it fails to integrate students. And currently, the Obama administration, they provided no support for pursuing integration at the time that this article was written. The authors also noted suburban changes. For instance, there's an increased number of minorities moving into the suburbs, and this has been driven primarily by both Black as well as Latino families. Suburban school districts are now more likely to be integrated than urban schools, and we have 1 in 10 students that are English language learners. Students who attend integrated school systems are exposed to a wider array and selection of classes. White children also have the additional benefit from being exposed to diverse groups. Students also develop a higher level of critical thinking skills, and many Caucasian students have reduced levels of stereotyping and prejudiced behaviors as a result of being part of integrated school systems. Some of the drawbacks of segregation include higher teacher turnover, less experienced teachers, as well as diminished academic gains and higher dropout rates for the students. The authors noted that challenges within communities in regards to, desegregation and reintegration efforts are ongoing. For instance, in the Wake County Public Schools in North Carolina, there was a new school board that was elected, and this school board actually sought to dismantle ongoing integration efforts. And in the process, they placed an emphasis on neighborhood schools, with housing patterns being what they are in that part of North Carolina. What that ultimately does is it creates a goal of recreating predominantly white school districts. Another example came from Omaha, Nebraska, where a member of the legislature actually sought to segregate the counties by white, Black, and Latino populations. And 11 districts ended up joining together to create communities which foster integration around districts. And they ended up developing an example where their in-a-district plans created an urban-suburban cooperation. So this is an example within this article of different ways in which communities continue to address, issues of integration and segregation. The authors do recommend, different solutions or different ways in which we can address integration challenges. For instance, we can look at the placement of students by the socio and economic status of students. This is used often to measure eligibility for free and reduced price lunches, and parent income and educational levels are also occasionally considered. There's also zoning. For instance, how do our communities, how do our city councils draw district lines? And how do we as a community make decisions for zoning and how that can influence integration policies? There's also inter-district efforts such as what we talked about with Omaha, Nebraska, as well as looking at how our housing policies affect student populations. And there are also in-school solutions that we can look at, which also include fostering diversity in the classroom, which is something that, our readings have addressed for class. Our class reading, Resegregation, What's the Answer, was written in response to the first article that I just discussed. Basically, Jonathan Kozol, Beverly Daniel Tatum, Susan Eaton, and Patricia Gandara, they came up with their own ideas and suggestions as far as how we could address, resegregating the classroom. Kozol's position is no half steps, no equivocation. In this particular segment, he says the suburban schools should admit inner-city students. Additionally, we need to provide on-site advocates and mentors for students who come from disadvantaged populations. He also recommended providing transportation in vans. He also wrote about a Boston program that has seen 90% of the Black and Hispanic students who've attended these schools graduate and attend college. Beverly Tatum makes the argument that rather than looking at efforts of reintegration, what we need to do is insist on excellence for all students. She states that the purpose of Brown versus the Board of Education wasn't so much to give students an opportunity to sit with white kids, but to provide equal access to resources and opportunities. And she doesn't see any reason why students of color cannot achieve at high levels. She noted in some school districts, high expectations and involved ministers and engaged parents can also make a difference. So she comes from the vantage point of rather than looking to correct practices in housing and practices in segregation, focus on investing in the schools that are there so that the students who are attending can achieve at a higher level. Susan Eaton takes the position that segregation is harmful. And she's part of the National Coalition on Student Diversity, which is a civil rights-oriented organization that encourages the government to increase funding for schools who are voluntarily diverse. She also says that we need to provide opportunities to students who are currently in high poverty, segregated areas to have the same opportunities that their middle class counterparts have. And additionally, we need to do other things as well, such as providing access to healthy food, the arts, music, safe space, mental health counseling, as well as other things. But like Kozol, she's very much firmly in the camp of making sure that schools are integrated in diverse environments. That way, everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential. Gandara takes the position that what we need to do is address housing inequities. It's the current practices of housing inequities where people are basically kind of shuffled into substandard and cheap housing that encourages modern practices of segregation. In order to address that, we need to come up with low income and subsidized housing and make that available in suburban environments, create magnet as well as dual language immersion schools, and counter some of the NIMBY or not in my backyard attitudes that some suburban residents may have. She states that segregation is harmful to all children, not just minority children, but all kids, because in order for our children to be able to live, work, and function in a multicultural society, it is important and necessary that integrated education is available for everyone. In conclusion, some of the readings that we have done for class have really challenged us to think in terms of multiculturalism. For instance, both Brown and O'Brien caution us to be aware of the fact that many pre-service teachers are not particularly well versed on the subject matter of multiculturalism. Additionally, we really ought not to be thinking of ourselves as teachers who are going to go in and play savior to any student who is representative of a minority class. Additionally, what can we do as pre-service teachers to address issues of multiculturalism, particularly if we find ourselves working in school districts that are predominantly white? And what can we do as teachers to continue to educate ourselves on issues like diversity and multiculturalism? And I hope that you look at the readings for the class and that the readings that we've discussed today, and to perhaps come up with some ideas and questions of your own. And with that, I hope you managed to get something out of this particular lecture. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and shoot me a message through ReggieNet. Thanks!